my name is Raisha, and 2 months ago I graduated from Sciences Po, where I studied political science and international trade and finance. And today I thought that I'd share some insight for students who are going to Sciences Po or are interested in studying there and would like to know what it's like to be in France, where you might not know the language, might not know anybody, but still want to do your best and have a great time at college, because that's definitely how the case was for me. And I remember that at the time that I was applying, there was a lot of advice out there on how to get into Sciences Po, but not a lot on how to stay there and actually do well. So in today's video, I'll just go through 10 tips or 10 things that I wish I knew before I got to France. And for simplicity's sake, I've divided them into 5 that you can put into action before you actually step foot in France, and 5 that will help you generally in your time at college, as well as when you're settling into the move. And again, I've said that this is more targeted towards students who are Sciences Pistes or aspiring Sciences Pistes, but definitely the tips are applicable for anyone who's new to college, wants to do well, might be an international student, looking for some insight from a fellow international student. So if there's anything that resonates in this video, let me know. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer in the comment box, as well as make any future videos on something that might be of further interest. But with that, let's get going. Tip number 1 is to learn French. And I know it sounds obvious, but you might think that, once you get to France or once you get to college, it'll be easy for you to learn the language by just being surrounded by French people and French culture. But it's really not like that, because the second you get to France, it's adulting times 1,000, right? I had to set up a bank account, a phone number, social security account, and do all of these things entirely in French. And what really helped me at that point was doing online courses from Alliance Française in A1 and A2 French that gave me the basic competency to be able to do all of these functions, of course with some amount of trip-ups, but still being able to do it to an extent where I could get the job done. So if you have some time between your grade 12 exams or your summer break before you actually get to college, I'd recommend investing some time into a language class to just make life a little simpler. Tip number 2 is to start your visa application as soon as possible. And again, this is kind of a no-brainer, but it's really unpredictable how long your visa can take. I remember that I was leaving early August and I got my visa literally the day before I left. And it was just super stressful, and all of that could have been avoided if I had started towards the end of May, which is around a comfortable timeline that I would recommend. And another pro tip that I'd say on this note is that if your visa is taking a little bit longer than expected, reach out to your country representative from Sciences Po's side, who can kind of put in a word with the consulate and get a pulse on where things are to just calm you down, as well as give you some more information on how things are looking. Tip number 3 would be to prepare for the homesickness. Again, you might expect that as an international student, it's common to feel overwhelmed and homesick. But for me, Sciences Po was my dream university, which meant that I only expected joy and excitement when I got there. And I was very, very wrong. Because literally week 1 into college, I was calling my parents, asking them where I was, and I just wanted to come back home. And in those moments, having food, having chai, having dresses that were Indian really allowed me to bring a piece of home to France with me. And I remember I would even teach my friends yoga or Bollywood dance or share my culture with other people. And doing that allowed me to once again feel more connected to back home, even when I was miles and miles away. So I guess the tip would be to, when you're packing, have a separate column that's for all the things that remind you of home, however tiny those might be, because I promise they will come in clutch. Tip number 4. Start socializing super early. For this one, I'd say tap into those networks that you know you're going to be immersed in at college. For example, when I was moving to Sciences Po, I was moving into an apartment building that had 20 other Sciences Po kids with me. So instead of just randomly, sporadically shooting messages to people on Instagram who had Sciences Po in their bio, I decided to text those people who I was going to be living near to. and not only text them and create a group chat so that we could all get to know each other, but also do one-on-one calls with people who I kind of felt a little bit more close to and more connected to. And just doing that allowed me to actually forge a bond even before I went to France. So when I did get there, I already felt like, okay, I know at least 2 or 3 people, I can recognize a few faces, and that just makes you feel like you're a little less alone in this strange country far away from home. And surprisingly, those people who I actually did that with have been my most close friends ever since. So really, really recommend that. Fifth and my last pre-going tip would be to think really hard about travel and plan it wisely. And the reason I say that is because when you're in Europe, it's so easy and so cheap to travel to all these amazing countries just because of the location that you're in. And I'd really recommend that you take advantage of that. This is a list of all the places that I visited when I was in France for 2 years. And I promise that my friends did even more, if not double, of all of these places. So it's super doable as long as you think through your academic calendar, identify the pockets in which your weeks are lighter, you don't have that many assignments, and fit travel to the locations that you want to go to in these little gaps. So one tip that I'd say to travel well is to figure out your travel style. And that means think about your family trips. What have you enjoyed? Did you like when your family would make you wake up at 6 a.m. and be out morning to night to see all the sights? Or are you more of the chill, walk around, get gelato kind of a person? You need to figure out which friends have the same travel style as you and then figure out travel with them. And if not, travel solo. It's super safe, very doable. Can definitely share more tips on that in a different video or in the comment box. One last pro tip that I'll say for travel is use apps like Omeo, Skyscanner, even ChatGPT, which can tell you which are the most affordable, time-efficient ways for last-mile connectivity, whether that means taking buses, trains, flights, or a combination of all of those, and how to do that affordably. That way, you can really get the maximum bang for your buck. Okay, so that was all the tips on things to do before you get to France. And here are the next 5 tips on what to do once you actually go there, and that's when the drama really starts. First one is invest in appliances. So I was a vegetarian in France, and you might think that that might be easy, but my love, pain au chocolat and bread is not going to give you the nutrients that you need. So my hack to get over this was invest in the different appliances that can make living healthy, eating healthy a lot faster. First thing, get a big freezer. My roommate knows this, but when we were house hunting in our second year, my only criteria for the apartment was that it needs to have a big freezer. And the reason I say this is because frozen veggies are your biggest health hack. They're super cheap, much cheaper than fresh produce. They can be chucked into literally anything and they cook down in minutes. And they're also a great way for you to sneak in vegetables, sneak in that spinach if you don't really like the taste of it. The second appliance I'd say is a blender. And a blender is great for, of course, your protein smoothies, your shakes. But a blender is also great for meal prep because you can chuck your onions, tomatoes, garlic into it, and it finally minces it in a way that you can again put it into a Ziploc bag, chuck it in the freezer, use it whenever you need to. The third appliance I'd say is really useful is an instant pot. Again, I'm Indian, which means that a lot of my cooking relies on beans, stews, lentils, and those things take time to cook. But with an instant pot, you can literally like set your rice or set your lentils or set your beans to cook automatically, and then they'll switch off on its own, which means that you don't need to like stick around and wait. You can set it in the morning, it'll switch off on its own, keep the food warm so it's ready to go when you're back. And the last appliance, I'll say, and this is really the creme de la creme of all the tips, is this shopping caddy like trolley. And that allows you to really very easily go grocery shopping by putting all your stuff that you buy in the bag and then hauling it to your apartment, which is helpful on the cobbled streets of Europe. Oh yeah, I will say I shopped most of my appliances off of Monoprix, which was in the central district of my town in France, but Amazon works well too. Tip number 7 is to be friendly but not friendless. And what I mean is that when you get to Sciences Po, you'll have to talk to everybody and it gets draining very quickly. But a good way for you to Make friends that are real and deep and genuine is to initiate one-on-one conversations with people who you actually connect with. The second thing I'll say is that sometimes life gets busy and it gets hard to stay in touch with people. My biggest hack for this is called the popcorn method. And what that means is that the second you think of someone, you're in history class, your professor said something, and you think of a friend, text them. Because the thought just pops up into your head and you act on it. And what that does is that it keeps you top of mind for people who you might want to initiate friendships with or get deeper and closer to, and also makes people smile, and that makes their day. So that really helps. And I'm almost done. Please stop. Tip number 8 is to find and then protect your peace. So we talked about this in the first half of the video, which was bringing things with you that can keep you kind of close to home even when you're away. But the unfortunate truth is that when you move away from home, you have to make whichever new place you're in feel like yours. And the best way to do that is to find new rituals or new things that keep you grounded, that make you happy. In my case, that was going to the gym, finding a way to keep moving, running by the canal, taking a walk, listening to a podcast. Anything that was movement-centric made me really, really happy. And I remember in my first year, I struggled to find time to go to the gym because it was very far away from where I lived. But in my second year, I made it a point to actually live in an apartment that was much, much closer to the gym. And automatically, I felt like my quality of life was better. I felt like a little bit more at home in France. So I think that if you can find those things that make you happy and then engineer your life shamelessly to incorporate that into your life, it'll keep you a lot more happy than sort of just expecting to feel joy in the small moments. And kind of on that note also, I will say that make it a point to have a daily calendar, like just live by a Google Calendar. And I know it's annoying and I know it's a very corporate slave thing to do, but seriously, it helps you to live a life that is balanced. Because you have all your classes on there and you can find time to do your laundry, keep your room clean, meal prep, all that good stuff, without necessarily have to compromise on other things, because you can see where there's white space to fit in more. So really utilize that calendar and just be shameless about it. Tip number 9 would be to take your studies seriously. And I know I sound like an Indian auntie saying this, because obviously you're there to study, right? But it's very easy to get overwhelmed by just keeping yourself alive, by feeding yourself and cleaning and making friends, that studies sometimes becomes really overwhelming, especially at a school like Sciences Po, where getting good grades is really, really difficult. And I'm not trying to brag, but in high school, I found topping relatively easy if you just memorized everything and went and vomited it out on the paper. But if you do that at Sciences Po, it's really not going to work, at least not to an extent where you can be happy with the grades you get and use those grades to get into a good school for your third year, which, by the way, is entirely grades dependent, no matter what anyone else might tell you. So my tips for studying and doing a good job would be to first make a really pretty Notion board. And again, basic advice, but it goes a really long way for the way that Sciences Po teaches. Because first you have lectures where you need to make notes. Then you have readings, which are based off the lectures, but are not discussed in the lectures. Third is seminar notes, which is where you'll discuss those reading notes, but also nuance them and generally incorporate class discussion. And if you have separate Notion tabs for each of these different steps of learning at Sciences Po, you'll feel like the work is actually not that insurmountable, and come exam season, you can actually sort of look at everything in isolation and realize which is most high priority, where do you need to really brush up, etc., instead of looking at everything as one and getting all the more confused. Second would be to find a study buddy and to not be afraid to ask for help. I'll give you a story, right? When I first started at Sciences Po, I was really proud. I was like, I know how to study, I got this. And fast forward to the final, I failed my humanities midterm. And the reason that happened was because I'm Indian, if you could not tell, and That meant that my class, which was focused on race and discrimination in the US, was way out of my comfort zone just because I had no understanding of a lot of the laws and the historical facts that we were talking about. And in the first semester, I was too proud to ask anyone for help. But in the second semester, I was like, okay, we got to get our shit together. And so I spoke to a friend of mine and asked her for help, and she was American. So she just naturally had a lot more context on American inequalities and race than I did. And she was more than willing to help me because she needed the revision herself, and the best way to learn is to teach. So I'd say that find this like mutually synergetic relationship with your friends where you can either teach them or have them teach you, and that becomes a really good self-reinforcing cycle to understand topics better and do a lot better in school, which is important. Last tip 10, fight confusion with curiosity. Now, when you're at a liberal studies school like Sciences Po, chances are you're taking mathematics, statistics, French, history, law, econ, political science, all of that in 1 week. So it's very, very likely that you're going to be very confused on what you actually like and what you actually want to do. This might get even more complicated when you're choosing your major in your second year at Sciences Po. And my biggest tip for you will be to just follow your curiosity. So if that means that during course registration, things mess up and you're not getting the classes that you really want, it's okay. Try to speak to professors and see if you can audit classes. Just email them or see them after their first session and just ask if you can audit their class for no credit. A lot of the times the professor might say yes, even if the admin might not officially allow you to do this. And it's a great way for even just attending 1 or 2 sessions and getting a good sense of that topic and seeing if it's something that you'd like to follow in the future. The reason why I say this really helps is because I did this when I was at Sciences Po and I did the philosophy major and later realized that I was into economics and business. And because I audited a class on social innovation, I was able to find my passion for this industry, which is what I'm going to be working in post-graduation. And that was 10 tips to get settled into Sciences Po or studying abroad in France or in Europe as an international student. If there's anything else that you'd like me to clarify, feel free to drop down questions or comments in the chat below, as well as connect with me on LinkedIn. If there's something more specific or personalized that I can help you with, I'd be happy to. But with that, we're done. Bisous.